And it goes a little something like.
Hey guys, what's up? Today we are back for another video, and for this video today we're doing a little bit of different project, but I'm getting into sewing things because I have a sewing machine and I used to do it back in high school, and so I want to get back in and see if I can get some practice in and do better. And I want to make myself a bag, but I want to make a patchwork bag, so we're basically going to do that today. And I'm gonna like quilt squares and build this bag so it's kind of like patchwork almost, but it might be more like a quilted bag, I don't know. But we're gonna start working on that today for this project, so that's what we're gonna do in this video. So let's get into the project. Okay, so we're at my sewing desk right now, and I'm just gonna show you the fabrics that we picked out. So I had this left over from another project I was doing, and I have a lot left, so I wanted to repurpose it and use it, but I did need to get more of the green, so I did do that. And then I bought some yellow. So these don't belong here. This is the first fabric. This is gonna be like the main patchwork piece, and we're gonna use 3 different colors, and we're going to basically cut out squares. And I have like a mock-up of it that I will show you guys in a second. But yeah, we're basically gonna take these 3 fabrics and cut out squares and sew them together and quilt them. And then we're probably gonna use some of this to give it the padding, because I like to have my bags be like padded a bit and have more like quality to them, because I always keep a lot of stuff in my bag, so we gotta have the best kind of strength for this. So yeah, and then we're gonna basically cut out the lining and sew it to the back of the patchwork. So it's gonna be like 2 sides that are going to be quilted, and then the inside lining is going to be this green, and then sew them together and then put handles on it. So that's what we're going to be working on today. Okay, so this is basically the mock-up. We have the 2 squares that are going to be sewn together, and then this is going to be the lining, and we might add a pocket in the inside if we can figure that out. I don't know if we can, or if we're able to figure that out, just to hold more storage and stuff. And so it's basically going to look like that. It's just a rough sketch, but yeah, I really want to make a patchwork bag because like I've been into them and I think they're really pretty, and I just love the look of them. So that's basically what we're going to be doing. And it's a little more quilted, as I said earlier, but I think I'm still going to go with this look because it'll still look good. But yeah, so let's get into the cutting and sewing. Okay, so let's grab our rulers out really quick. Oops, we dropped them. Anyways, these aside over here, and then we're just gonna move the sewing machine back first while we use our cutting board. It's not very efficient, but this is how we use our desk because we have limited space in my room. So yeah, anyways, we want this bag to be big enough to at least fit like my iPad and a book or something. So we need to account for that in the space. So this is the iPad I use, which is the iPad Pro, which I use for school and stuff, because I love using iPads a little more than computers sometimes, because I like to draw and sketch and take notes by hand. But yeah, it's roughly the size of a piece of paper, so it's like 8 by 11. As you can see, this piece of paper right here is basically its size, almost. So we definitely need to make it a few inches bigger than that, so that when we sew, because when you sew, it takes up so much space that it will shrink. So we definitely need to account for like maybe like 2, 3, or even more inches of size that might like shrink up or take up when we quilt. Especially when we quilt and put the batting in, it'll be way more thicker, so it'll take up more size when you sew and flip. It'll be like smaller than you actually think, so make it bigger than you actually think you need to. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so I headed to my grandmother's house because she's got a huge sewing machine and everything to like help me like plan out this project a little more, because I'm still fresh and I'm trying to figure out how to get better at this. And she gave me this patchwork book, which we're gonna look at and see if there are any other options for something that'd be fun and cool to do as a patch design. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do because I don't know if I just want to do straight squares, because that's kind of boring. But yeah, let's see. A lot of these seem like they're really complicated, but we'll try to find something simple and let you know what we pick. Okay, so basically the idea we were going for anyways is actually the square patch look for block. So I think that's what we're going to end up doing, but yeah. So I ended up going on the internet to look for some like references or something to go off of to help me have some inspiration because I really didn't know what to do. But basically that yellow one and blue one kind of looks like my fabric and stuff, so I feel like it's close enough. But that's kind of the idea I was going for, but I don't know if we're going to achieve that today, but we will try. And it is going to be like a tote bag style, as you can see, like some of these bags right here. But yeah, so now we're going to get into the next part of this, which is we're going to make a little mock-up of this to help us get size. So we're basically just measuring the iPad and the sides to get a rough sketch of sizing for this bag's base. And now we're just sewing along the edge of this and around the whole entire thing to get it sewed up so that we can test it and see if our iPad fits pretty well. So basically here's what we have, and it fits pretty well, but I think it's just a little too big. So we're going to cut off a little bit of that and fix that and shorten it just by an inch. So I used the ruler to draw the line, and now we're just going to go sew this real quick right here, time lapse. And here's what we have right here. This is a pretty good size to go with, I think, but we're going to check it out and make sure, flip it right side out, and then put the iPad in it and see how it fits. And I think we got a pretty good size right here. So this is what we're going to use as the base of our bag to cut out in our actual fabric. So we've folded that in just at the line right here. So now we've got the height perfectly adjusted to the iPad. And as you can see here, it's a pretty good sizing and will be a good size tote bag. So good spacing for the height and folded into the height that we needed. And yeah, as you can see, we sewed around it. And it still has the little bit amount of space and room for it to keep like an inch of seam just in case, because this is going to take up a lot of seam because we're quilting it and everything. So yeah, and it holds pretty well. So now we're going to move on to the next step. We're just going to iron our fabric real quick and smoothen it out at the seams. So there's that. If we take the rule and measure it, you can see that it hits about 12 by 10 inches. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really know what I'm doing here because I'm trying this out on my own and figuring things out as I go, because this is not natural. It's like I hand taught myself, teaching myself how to do this stuff. But yeah, so here is the build that we have here. We have a little lines right there to keep our measurements right. Words are hard, but yeah. We're basically going to figure out the size of the squares that we will be cutting here, and here's a little like design or graph of what it's going to look like. Future me, it does not turn out like this, but it does still look really good. So yeah, anyways, here is the denim fabric that we found, which actually goes really well with my shoes. So we're actually going to end up using this because my grandma said she had a bunch of it left over, and it's like the exact fabric that I need. And I was like, you know, denim with it, look, it even matches the flowers perfectly. So I was like, thank you so much for giving me this. This is perfect. And now we can have denim in our bag, which is even more stylish, in my opinion. But now we're going to be measuring out our squares to cut for this bag that we're going to be quilting and sewing together, patching for the patchwork bag. And we're using this erasable marker by heat. It erases, so we're just going to draw our lines with this, and then we'll iron the marker off and it'll disappear. But yeah, so our squares are about 2 inches by 2 inches, I believe. And we're making, this isn't really important because it's just however you think you'll need. For us, we made like 3, 4, a couple a row, and I think I made like 16 per this piece of fabric, but it just depends on how much you want to make for yourself. But we made 7 a row here, and then we're just going to cut them out, but this is just however much you need, because honestly, we didn't really have a set amount of count at first, or we did at first, but then we just ended up switching our plan. So I don't remember how many squares we used, but yeah. So I cut out about 16 squares here, but the number again doesn't really matter because you can cut out as many as you need or whatever you want to do for this project if you want to follow along. But yeah, we're using this roller to cut them out and then our scissors to cut across the lines. And that's pretty much it on how we made the squares. And then we're going to do the same with our other two fabrics. We've got yellow and green. And then the denim is going to come in use somewhere else. It's not going to be where we do our quilting. So yeah, we're just going to cut these out real quick and then we'll get into the next step. Okay, so we have quite a few cut out right here, as you can see in the little box, which is where we're keeping them for now. And now we're going to cut out some more squares, but we're going to cut them out in the yellow now because this is going to be our second color that we use to make our quilted square piece, and then we'll add green later. And now once we're done cutting that, as we finish, we're going to get into the next step of sewing them together to make the full square quilt piece. Okay, so here is how we're making our little quilted squares. We're basically taking the yellow and the pattern and we're putting them right sides together, pinning them and sewing them straight down, as you can see here. And then we're going to iron at the seam. So basically we're just going to create a bunch of these as two pieces, as you can see here. This is the first piece, and then you're going to iron there at the seam. And then we're going to take a second piece, and we're going to take them right sides together and sew those two together. So then we have two sets of two, and iron at the seam for both of them. And then you're going to take both of the pieces and you're going to sew them together. But right now we're just making a bunch of 2 square pieces so that we can create, we need, I think for the bag we used maybe 8 of these 2 squares, something like that. But yeah. So now that we have all of our squares made, and you can see they match up pretty well, now we're going to iron them all out, and then we're going to go back to the sewing machine and sew them all together. So first we're going to take them and make sure they line up correctly. So we're doing a crisscross pattern. So lining pattern, and then we're pinning them together at the top. And we're going to sew just across the top to make sure that we hit the mark and it lines up in the center, which as you can see here, it lines up pretty well with the center. So that means we're good to go. And now we're going to just keep continuing sewing across the edge and pin it all together. This just helps keep it all straight if you're a perfectionist like I am. I like things to look really nice, so this will just help keep it straight and stuff. And then we're just going to sew down the line like that, and then you've got your first patchwork square, and then we got to make a couple more of these. So I think we make 4 of these 4 squares, and then we're gonna put them all together on the piece. And of course we iron at the seam again, as you can see here. And then once we're done, we'll move on to the next part of this bag. So we finished ironing all of them, and here's what they look like. Pretty good, right? Yeah. So we've got 2 right here, and then this is what they're gonna look like. So I guess I only used 2. That was my bad, not 4. Math is hard sometimes. Anyways, you got 2, and this is just the layout of the bag so we can use it as perspective. And we did cut those green squares to match the other sides, and this is how our pattern's looking. So as they line up, we're basically just gonna sew all of these together now. We're going to sew the first 2 together, and then the second 2 together, and then them both together. Right, as you can see here, basically the same process that we did with the 2 squares, but doing it with these 2 giant squares. And then we're going to sew those together and also iron at the seam again. And then in the end, we will have all four sewed together into one big giant square, which will be the base of the bag. And then we'll continue from there. Okay, so basically now we're taking the 2 other pieces and sewing them together so we can make the second half of the big giant 4 square that will be the base of our bag. And then we're ironing at the seam, again, as you can see here. And then once we finish that, we're going to take our 2 pieces and then we're going to sew them together. Again, the crisscross, so green, green, diagonal, and then the pattern, so green pattern, and then we're going to sew down the line. Again, using the same technique of starting in the middle so that we can mark it and get a straight center piece and line so it looks good. And then we're going to continue to sew down the line after we do that and check, and you can see that it matches, the lines line up on both sides, so we're good to go. So like I said, now that we're done with that and it lines up good, we're going to sew all the way across through the line, and then we're going to get our 4-piece together, and we'll take the giant big piece that's going to be the base of our bag, and we'll iron it out on the seams and make sure it's good to go. And now we're going to move on to the next step. Basically for the outer edge, we're going to be using the denim, this is where the denim comes in, and we're going to be sewing along the excess space. It's going to be all denim, so that's what we're going to do next. We're going to clip this on together, and so the outside of the border, so we're going to have the patchwork in the center, and the border is going to be all denim, which later we run into problems and end up having to add more fabric, but it still turns out pretty good in my opinion, so yeah. But here we go, sewing the bag together, and then of course ironing at the seam again, making sure that we get it straight, and yeah. Now we're just going to cut the excess fabric off right there, and this is what the first part of the bag looks like, and now we're going to fill the rest with denim and some excess fabric, as you will see later. But basically right sides together again, as we did the first set, sewing it across, flipping it over and ironing it, and then you'll get the same thing just like we did on the other 2 sides. So we're basically just going to take these little strips that we have right here, flipping them right sides together again, and sewing along, and then ironing the seam, basically how we've done everything else so far. And now we're going to move on to the next piece of this bag, which is adding the last piece of denim on the bottom to fill the rest of the space. So we're basically going to, again, right sides together, clip it, and then sew it down the line. So we sewed it all the way down through time lapse, as you can see there, and then we have it perfectly made right here, and then we'll iron that out. But yeah, basically what we are doing next is adding the outer layer of fabric out of this flower fabric to fill in the excess spot, which was the other problem that we had. It was too small, so we needed to add a little more. So we're basically going around the whole bag, and we're going to be adding that flower fabric around the edges. So we cut it into strips, and then we put them right sides together, pinned it, and then we again sewed down the line. And we did that for all of the 2 sides. I think we did it for one side and then the other. And then it'll give us the size we need for our bag. So now we're taking it over to the sewing machine and sewing down the first strip. And then after that, we'll iron it, and then we'll sew down for the next strip. And yeah, here's what that is finished. As you can see, we sewed both of the strips. So it's pretty good now, and we're gonna again iron the rest of this so it's like straight, and then we're gonna cut off the extra fabric that we have on the edges right there, the flower. We're gonna take the ruler and we're gonna make sure that it's straight and cut that excess fabric off. And yeah, so here is the base of our bag right now. This is what it looks like. I think it's pretty good so far. We do have to repeat the process for the second side, but now we are going to do the same. We've got our 2 pieces, our green pieces, and yeah, we're going to place them there and basically do the same thing before the other side. And so across, and same steps, just repeat them. And there we go. So now we've done that, we've done the square, and now we're going to repeat the process and do the denim on the outside. And here's that with the denim and also the extra fabric. So we have 2 sides now, and then we're going to do green as our lining. So later we will add that in, but now we are coming into our next problem, which there's always going to be problems, so it's okay though. So basically the issue is the denims are like uneven on the top is got a lot more denim than the bottom. So if we wanted it to like look more cohesive and better, this is what we're going to do, because we're going to outline the whole top half with this flowered fabric. So we're basically, I don't really know how to explain this to you, but we're folding up the fabric and marking where the, basically when I fold it up, it like tells me the difference of fabric that I have left in order to measure it to keep it the same size. So we're taking that fabric and then we're lining it up to the edge and then folding it over, because we have to have right sides together so that we have a clean edge, and then pinning that together, sewing it down, and then we're flipping it back over and ironing it. So this process might be really confusing, and I'm really sorry that a lot of this video is confusing, but anyways, this is what we did for both of the two sides of the bag, and we ironed it, and now we have perfect matching bags. And now we're just going to cut that excess part of denim because it's not needed, and we're just going to cut that off. So now we just have flower at the top. And here is where we come into even more trouble, because at first I couldn't even figure out what I wanted to do for quilting. We were just going to do like the original diagonal quilt, but I was like, that kind of looks stupid. I didn't really like it. So then after drawing all these lines, we basically just trashed that, and I brought out my notebook and marker and started designing. We've got many different options here where we could either do like the crisscross or we could do like the lines. And then I even looked up inspiration on the internet to see what I liked, which didn't really help me much because all I saw were these really cool designs that I was like, I probably couldn't do. And then we went back and we had some talk, and there's diagonal lines again, but then the straight lines, vertical, we didn't know what to do. But then we finally had an idea, because I don't remember how this came up, but our bag was like the plus sign, so you got like the line here and the line here, and the vertical and horizontal lines. And then we figured out that we're gonna do the star shape, where it's all crisscross lines, as you can see in my sketch right there. This is what we're gonna do, and yeah, so basically we're going to take this and we're going to draw out the star across with the ruler, which I clearly forgot to record. Okay, so next we basically have the green fabric that's been cut out, and we cut out 2 of those for both sides, and this is going to be the back side of the bag, so it's going to be our green inside interior, and then we'll have some lining for the inside too to make it all perfect. But yeah, basically now we're going to sew our quilted part together. And this is where we're going to put our batting in for quilting, and we're going to take these 2 sides, and this time they're going to be the correct sides facing each other like this. So you have the front side here and the back side is green. And then we're pinning. This process is hard because you don't want it to bunch up, so you have to pin at like every little spot and make sure it's not bunched up. And you want to start from the middle, sewing to the outside. So when you do that, it helps it not bunch up so much. So it can be tedious, but especially when quilting can be super tedious. But if you want it to like not bunch up and look a little nicer, start from the center and go out for every line, and then it'll keep it from bunching up. That's what my grandma told me. So we're using her advice, and she always seems to always seems to turn out super nice, and like everything like looks so perfect. So whenever I get her help, I take it because it helps make everything look good. Okay, so we finished this first side, as you can see here, and this is what the star shape looks like. It looks pretty good, right? So center and out, and you'll get this result, basically. So yeah, now we're going to iron off this marker that we used, the heatless marker, and get rid of that. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side, because we got to do it for both pieces of the bag. So now we're going to take our pins out and cut the threads, the excess threads that are in the way. And then we'll make sure that the heatless marker is also gone after we remove all those pins. So we're going to use our iron to iron it off, and boom, gone. Then we are going to move on to the other side of the bag and cut those threads too to clean it up and make sure it looks all nice and neat. And then we're going to also iron off the marker again like we did for the other side of the bag. So we have both of our pieces ironed, and there's the marker gone and perfectly done. So here's this piece and then the other piece. So now that we have both of our pieces, we're going to put right sides together as usual, pin it, and then sew a U shape along the bag, starting at the top, going around the entire piece, as you can see here. And we're just going to keep sewing down using this marker to have a good guideline to match up the edges and keep it straight. And then we're going to end that and cut the threads and get rid of all the pins. And then we're going to flip it right side out to see how it turned out. And yeah. So as we flipped it inside out, there is a little bit of a hole right there that we didn't catch when sewing. So sometimes that's annoying, but we're just going to reflip it back inside out and sew that, and there it is, fixed, completely perfect, and there's no holes. So we're good. Now we're going to move on to what we're going to do next. So next we have to add in our green lining. As you can see in here, we don't want all that rough edges. So we're going to take our green lining that we're going to make in a minute and put it inside there to make sure that it works, and we're going to be using that green fabric again. And yeah, for now we're going to iron the bag so that it's flat and like perfect, and we get everything nice and neat after flipping it, reversing it. So we're going to iron it since it looks pretty good now. And yeah. So now that we have finished ironing it, we're going to take our green fabric and cut 2 pieces of this into the size of the bag, and then we're going to sew a U shape around it like we did the whole bag. As you can see here, we are pinning it together and sewing along the entire thing, and we marked some lines of where the bag is gonna like end and stop and fold over or whatever when we finish this. So yeah, once we've sewed across the whole thing, we have our green fabric. We're going to flip it right side out after sewing it right sides together, and then we're going to iron it at the seams and everything like we've been doing. So we're going to take our iron and iron that real quick, and then we'll flip it right side out. And we're going to iron over the top so that we keep a clean edge, because we don't want any like frayed or edges and stuff. And then we're going to put that in and test our stuff inside to see how everything fits, to make sure it's a good size. And yeah, it's pretty good. So now that we have that done, our next thing that we wanted to do was add a little pencil pouch inside, which is a little random, but I honestly like my bags to have a little pocket to hold things, and I always be carrying pens and pencils with me because I always love to like just draw and have like the necessities. So we're measuring out a little pocket for our markers and highlighters. And we're basically just taking the width of that and cutting it out into this like rectangle shape that we will fold over. And we're using some little iron-on stuff in the inside to give it some padding and durability. And we use denim as the other fabric on the inside as the lining, and we sprayed it with water so that we could iron it together and make it stick, and then fold it in half and then sewed across the edges to sew that up. And we used the guide again to keep the lines straight when sewing, and then we cut the corners so that when we flip it, the corners would flip easier in form. And then we have our pouch done, the yellow lining on the outside, and we drew on our green thing a little spot to pin the bag or pocket pouch thing in, and then we're just going to sew across, and there's that finish. As you can see, it fits my Apple Pencil and all my pens pretty well, so it worked out pretty good. So this is what it looks like. And now we're moving on to the next step, which is making the straps. So basically we have cut some strips of denim, and we have some cut strips of batting, which we're going to put inside, and we're going to sew this over and then flip and reverse and then insert the cut batting. But we basically pinned that all together and sewed that down the line, and we used this little tool to flip it inside out. That helped. And then we ironed at the seam, and then we used scissors to cut the excess to make sure it was even, and we made 2 straps of these. And as you can see, the holes we're going to stick inside the batting, and these straps are 26.5 inches long, just for reference if you want. And now we're going to take the little batting inside, and we're using these scissors to like pull it through. It's hard to show this process, but yeah, we basically used the crimping scissors or whatever they are and stuck them in and pulled the fabric or batting through the fabric. And we did that twice, and then we cut the excess after ironing it, and then we sewed on top of our bag to get rid of the open seam, We sewed on some excess green fabric that we cut and flattened neat, and now we're sewing on our bag straps, which we folded underneath and then sewed at the line about like an inch. And yeah, we're cutting off the little threads and ironing off the blue, and we sewed both of those on together on either side. So here's what it looks like all sewed together, and basically that is the bag. But now we're just gonna see how everything fits and show you all of that. And I can fit my book, my pens, my iPad, and it fits pretty well. Everything works really well together, and I honestly quite love the way this turned out, even though this video is probably like wicked confusing, and I'm sorry about that. But hopefully you guys will enjoy this video still, because I really had fun like doing this and making it. And yeah, this is the finished product. So thanks for watching, and I'm hoping to post some shorts of me making some new sewing projects, because I'm really into this right now, and I'm hopefully going to start maybe selling some things when they actually turn out pretty good, because I have the help of my grandma. But yeah, that's it for this chaotic, crazy video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.